Hi, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on anti-precarity organizing. As you know, EASA has been involved in supporting the struggle against precarity among anthropologists and among academics more broadly for a while now. And so this webinar has for aim to present the results of a research that we initiated as EASA with the last executive committee. And so let me introduce to you the speakers that we have today. They do encompass both the last and the current executive committee. And we have guests who will talk a little bit more about anti-precarity organizing from their own contexts. As we know, anti-precarity organizing response to the local context in terms of policy, in terms of social hierarchies, in terms of what is possible to do against precarity within the policy framework of every country. And so we have a couple of cases that we're going to take a deeper look into today. So first of all, we have Fiona Murphy. Fiona, thank you so much for joining us. So Fiona is an anthropologist who is based at the School of Applied Language and Intercultural Studies at Dublin City University in Ireland. And she works with stolen generations in Australia and people seeking asylum and refuge in Ireland, the United Kingdom, and Turkey. She has a particular passion for creative and public anthropologies. She is actually one of the founders of the Creative Anthropology Network. And she is always interested in experimenting with new forms and genres of anthropology. You also have a link to her TEDx talk on displacement on the website, on the webpage of our webinar. And Fiona was a member of the executive committee between 2022 and 2020 and 2022. I will let Fiona introduce our main speaker for today, who is Heather McKnight, and I will just, who is also the author of our report, and I will just go ahead and introduce to you the other three speakers that we'll listen to later on. We have with us Nasrin Khandokar, who is a feminist and an anthropologist and who works as a postdoc researcher on the cybersocial project at the University College Cork, also in Ireland. She received her PhD in anthropology from Maynooth University and has worked as a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Limerick and Galway University. She was an associate professor in the Department of Anthropology at Jahangir University in Bangladesh. Her research interests are gender and sexuality, Bangla folk song, migration, gender-based violence, emotion and affect, embodiment and post-colonial critiques. And she will talk more about what it is to be, what it is like to be a precarious migrant in Western academia. And then we also have Petra Ezzedin, who is a social anthropologist at the Department of Social and Cultural Anthropology, the Faculty of Humanities at Charles University in Prague. Her research focuses on gender in migration, transnational practices of care, aging in migration, the marketization and financialization of care, and applied anthropology. She's currently working on the joint international research project CareOrg, funded by the Volkswagen Stiftung. This is a research on transnational senior care organization work and mobility in Central and Eastern Europe. Throughout her academic career, she has been active in advocacy in the field of gender, care, and migration, and now, of course, in the field of anti-precarity. She has worked closely with several Czech and Slovak NGOs, EU and international organizations, working with migrant women and migrant domestic workers. And finally, we also have with us Isabel Bredenberger. They are a social and cultural anthropologist working between art and academia. They hold a DFG Walter Benjamin postdoctoral fellowship, which is based between the Center for Anthropological Research on Museums and Heritage at the Herman von Helmholtz Zentrum für Kulturtechnik at the Humboldt University in Berlin. Isabel's work focuses on material and visual culture, anthropology of art and museums, queer theory and intersectionality, situatedness and autoethnography, colonialism, cleaning and waste. They have produced ethnographic films, worked with field recording, and co-curated as well as contributed to exhibitions in museum and contemporary art contexts. And Isabel's book has recently been published open access with Berghan and is called Rest in Plastic: Death, Time and Synthetic Materials in a Ghanaian Ewe Community. So I will now pass the word on to Fiona, who will explain to you a little bit more of the background in which this report was produced.
Thank you. Thanks, Anna. Hi, everybody. As Anna said, I was a member of the EASA exec from 2020 to 2022 up to the point of the Belfast EASA conference. So it's great to see all of you here to hear and listen to a little bit about the work of the former exec and the current exec around precarity. And this is a really, as we all know, goes without saying, a really important conversation about the texture and presence of precarity in our lives, and its unyielding manner in which it's reshaping our discipline. And so I'm going to take you a little bit through EASA's engagement with precarity, a journey that's a lot more than about data and reports, a journey about our lives, the conditions in which we work, create, and try to make sense of ourselves and indeed of each other. So when we talk about precarity, as we all know in the room, we're not just describing low wages or unstable contracts. Precarity for many of us, and I know this very well myself, having been precarious for a long time, is a framework of existence. It's a way of being in which our connection to our work, to stability, even to a sense of purpose is fragile. And precarity is basically a condition that we feel very, very deeply, that leaves its mark not just on the individual, but on the broader sort of anthropological community. And it has become, a part of the landscape, unfortunately, one in which many of us have to navigate daily. And EASA has, long recognized the pervasive sort of challenges of precarity. This recognition kind of evolved into a fuller commitment, not only to understand precarity in its full depth, but also to respond to it in more meaningful ways. And to address these concerns more directly, EASA created the role of precarity liaison officer. That's the role one of the roles that I had in my time alongside Chris Shore. And we know over the years that many members of the exec have run on kind of an anti-precarity agenda, including Anna and Alexandra. So in 2018, EASA took a further step by joining forces with Precanthro, the Precanthro collective, whose members had been organising since about 2016 to bring attention to these very specific hurdles of building a career in anthropology. And together, EASA and Precanthro launched a survey, a tool to make visible and give shape to what so many of us had already sort of felt. And the aim there was to map the landscape of precarity, drawing on emerging themes from recent studies on the casualisation of labour across Europe. So the survey and the report that followed went beyond capturing individual stories, as many of you likely know if you have already read it. And the report, it really went into kind of understanding the structures shaping these experiences. The report led by Martin Fota, Maria Ivancheva, and Raluca Pernes, asked really, really important questions, such as how are anthropologists navigating academic life when it's increasingly defined by temporary contracts, constant mobility, and perpetual fundraising. And what does it mean to try and build a future on ground that never fully settles? And perhaps most pointedly, what can labour unions realistically offer when institutional power dynamics remain so fluid? We know that the findings resonated very deeply within our anthropological community. The report itself revealed a growing division between research and teaching, a split that leaves many of those on teaching contracts feeling often quite undervalued. It highlighted the rise of various contract types that deny academics any real stability, forcing them to piece together a living from project to project, something which many of us here know about, with each funding cycle kind of casting a shadow on an individual's future. And this fragmentation, unfortunately, reflects a much broader trend of academic casualization. And the report also brought out significant, it showed us significant regional differences, showing the varied pressures that anthropologists face across Europe. And so while there was a shared reality in the findings, that precarity, while deeply personal in its effects, is ultimately structural, is a system that transcends individual experiences. It affects us all. But I think the report highlighted just quite how varied some of those differences are. So following the release of the report and the response to it, EASA's commitment to the precarity agenda intensified under Maria Ivancheva's leadership as EASA president. We saw a unique opportunity to take this work even further. So alongside Chris Shore and I, we saw the possibility to continue the sort of relationship with PreCancer, but also other organisations advocating and fighting for further awareness around precarity, and this is kind of where Heather comes in and her work. We decided very much that further explorations were needed to expand on the 2020 report, and we advertised a research consultancy position and hired Heather McKnight, who we're going to hear from in a minute. And Heather really brought like extraordinary depth of knowledge and effort to this work and passion. She has a career, I think, rooted really in understanding precarious labour, academic ethics, and very importantly as well, collective care. She has a PhD in law and operates her own research consultancy, Magnetic Ideals Collective, and she's actively advocated for the rights of academics in precarious positions, engaging with projects that explore care as a collective practice, especially in uncertain and unstable environments. And her approach asks us to rethink care not as a personal response, but also as an institutional commitment to those who comprise its foundation. And Heather's report, as we will see when we hear from her, doesn't simply catalogue symptoms. It offers a roadmap challenging us to envision a kind of academia that we unfortunately have not yet built, a place where care, respect and stability are core commitments, not aspirations. So just a few final words before we hear from Heather about the report. I suppose, why does EASA's commitment matter? For EASA, this work is more than a standalone report. It's also a vision for the future of our discipline, one grounded in solidarity, structural reform, mentorship, the kinds of things that we've seen under the presidency of Anna taking shape and form. And we know that anthropology, like lots of other disciplines, depends on relationships, mentors and students, colleagues across generations, networks within universities, and the broader fabric of research environments. Yet as precarity grows, we know that these bonds strain, fray, and in some cases fall apart, diminishing not only individual careers, but the vibrancy and diversity of our discipline as a whole. And Heather's report further shows that these issues stretch, of course, as we know, well beyond anthropology departments. And I think on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Heather just to hear the details about the report. So thank you very much. And yeah.
Hi, thanks very much, Fiona, for that really kind introduction. And indeed for having me to speak here today about this project. I'm just going to share my screen just now, which worked fine a second ago, so that should be fine. And I just want to say that there's as much as I'm presenting this as my research, there's been I was so well supported by members of Canthro and EASA through this. We like had it as quite a project and quite a kind of 6-month project to start with, I think, and it did grow, and there was so much information out there, whether it came through our survey or whether it came through just other channels and conversations, debates, that we tried to include in the final report. And I'm not going to be able to cover, I think, justice that people have given me their stories of success and difficulties within the space of this. But the full report will be up in a couple of months, and the executive summary very soon on the website. Just click go forward. There we go. It skipped that slide, but I think Fiona has already covered that in a lot of detail already. Why there is a need for this report, and it sounds like people here are have worked in precarity. I've been in precarious situations. Currently working as an independent researcher. We are all self-employed within Magnetic Ideals. As researchers, activists, artists, and some of us have communities background as well. So this is something that we do care deeply about, and things like working on the fringe of academia and breaking down those barriers, kind of troubling those assumptions that keep the structures of power and oppression in place. Anyway, I'll try and keep to my script so that we can spend as much time as possible in discussion. So just to give an idea of what we collected, we created quite a lengthy questionnaire together, and got about 28 responses. And further desk-based research identified 88 anti-precarity initiatives. So we're looking at over 100 kind of over 100 initiatives across Europe and beyond. Although, as you'll see, they weren't necessarily very evenly distributed. We looked at national examples of strategic efforts, as well as what was happening locally. Did 14 in-depth case studies of movements, and also like 6 in-depth case studies of higher education law in different countries and how that was working to make things more precarious, which was what we had time to do within the remit. But it really, I think, exemplifies just how differently oppression is working within countries, and also maybe examples of how some laws are working and how laws that you think are going to make things less precarious sometimes do the opposite. And we looked at academic institutions, what they were doing. We looked at unions, informal initiatives, and collectives as well. Really kind of recognizing that work doesn't just happen in unions or in very, very formal structures. So I wanted to talk a bit about the limits of the research. So this is very much a snapshot of what we could capture in 2022. Obviously, that was at the end of lockdown. There's been a lot of changes since then. It's been a very turbulent time. We had kind of, I guess, limitations in timing. I guess I was kind of precariously working as well, being supported by precarious workers in the research itself. So your relation builds as much as you can, but for those of you working in activism, it does require time to build up trust, and I think that has limited in some ways some of the engagements that I would have liked to have had and liked to have included that I haven't been able to. The existing commitments and fear of increased precarity of precarious activist academics, if they are engaging with something else, is that making their jobs even less secure than they already are, or even more precarious? I also work in English, and we sent the survey out in English. I did use a lot of translation software at the time, which again has advanced quite a lot with AI, but the dominance of the English language unfortunately has, I think, kind of limited who we've engaged with in terms of the diversity. Some countries already had existing mapping of kind of anti-precarity, which is great, but also created bias in terms of who we're looking at. And there's just this huge variety of what precarity means and what different words are used for precarity in different countries, which added an extra level of complexity to the research. But hopefully this will be hopefully a starting point, a snapshot, a place to move from, where we can learn about that as well. There's also delays, obviously, due to industrial action, which people were fighting against precarity, and solidarity work at that time that was happening with a lot of the academics I was engaging with Ukraine. And I'm happy to come back to the limits on this as well later on. Hopefully you can see here just some of the there is a huge bias towards UK, Germany, Switzerland, Spain, and Italy. I think this is partly due to EASA's networks and my own networks, like I said. But I have tried throughout, when we dig into the report, to focus on, for example, I did do in-depth. I did do an in-depth look at both laws in Hungary and Malta, because they were quite a bit more unusual, to make sure that there was representation, that we're trying to look at and understand some more diversity within the countries that we're looking at, and not just Western Europe. This is a list of the 14 case studies. Again, I'd love to speak a bit more detail. I will say again that it's biased towards UK because it was easier for me to get them very, very quickly. But I try to pick things that were not represented by the other case studies when it came to selecting them. For example, for library jobs, looked at professional services work, very specifically. There was looking at representation of the neurodivergent workforce, which has come far more into the forefront actually over the last couple of years as we've come out of lockdown as well. I will mention we also looked at the Academia for Equality in Israel, and they're very much an organization, if you don't know them, that were while within Israel worked in opposition to the complicity of Israeli academia, looking at the denial of education in occupied territories, and worked in solidarity with Palestinian students and researchers. I did try to engage with Palestinian groups, and I did speak to Palestinian researchers, but they were not keen to engage and expose themselves in this research. And I think that is completely understandable. But again, it's recognizing the limits of doing this kind of research with with precarious academics, and asking them to give a lot of themselves. It's also, I don't know if I've mentioned why that the report is completely anonymous. Even some people were prepared to put their names to things, unless it's there is obviously a bibliography of of people who in the context and everything, but the decision was made to anonymize everyone because we didn't know how people's situations would change. So looking at findings, I'm going to start with the negative stuff that we probably already know, that precarity is a prominent concern across higher education in Europe and beyond. High levels of temporary contracts exacerbated by increased neoliberal managerial approaches, The number of precarious workers tends to vary, although again, I don't know what change this has been from about 50% to 90% of the workforce. Patterns such as the degradation of research conditions and poor working environments, closure to social sciences and humanities, detrimental impact on staff health and living conditions and knock-on effects on their families are apparent across the board. Again, this is maybe a slightly negative slide. We're going to get on to what we can do about it soon. But this there's a lot of challenges to organising that I've already mentioned. But one of the complexity of really organising of precarious workers, both in terms of trying to research and organising, is actually just finding out who they are, because it's not just a tick box. They don't say you're a precarious academic. There's a real diversity across contracts and disciplines, and they look different in different disciplines, and they can look different at different points in their careers as well. There's no central register saying I'm a precarious academic necessarily. That's held collectively by the institution. So difficult to organize and difficult to find to research because of that. There's also like the erasure of the idea of this long-term precarity. There's still it's still seen as an early career research issue predominantly, although I think maybe that is shifting slightly. It's a failure, I think, to consider all staff in the institution. We need to see precarious academic and precarious professional services staff as part of this. And that quite often, that the outsourcing starts with them, and they, and if we can understand how they can resist, that could be really, really beneficial for people within academia. It's also, as we know, we're working with a kind of disappearing contingent all the time. People are not in one post. People I emailed about this recently, I was struggling to track them down because I don't know how many jobs they've had since this research has taken place, if they've been in work at all. Also, activist work is hard. Precarious researchers are stressed for time, underpaid already, and trying to do and work as activists, as many of you in this room know, is already very difficult. But despite these challenges, people are working to change things, and I think we all know that. So first of all, the first thing that came out of this finding is this real need to control the narrative, and we saw there's a lot of success stories around this. Anti-precarity groups are doing significant research into precarity, informing evidence-based campaigning, increasing general awareness. There's maybe a lack of evidence on the campaign messaging side of things, legal challenges, and we could do with maybe a more longitudinal understanding of the impact of precarity on an academic's career trajectory and life course. But I think some of this is probably coming out of EASA and Precanthro as well. Generating solutions to precarity and agenda setting locally and nationally happens often through joint union committees, presenting research to HR and regulatory bodies. Many groups are engaged in policy work at a national and a local level. Priorities here include equalities work, funding, as been mentioned already, issues around academic and scientific freedom, and at the time that I was doing this, obviously the pandemic. Most initiatives actually felt their actions had affected some kind of change that they've engaged with, whether that was through the survey or through looking at their websites or the case studies, which is really heartening to hear. And these changes include raising awareness at an individual, institutional, and governmental level, often achieved by sharing personal stories and testimonies collected during campaigns. Engaging with the press through campaigns that threaten to damage the reputation of the higher education institutions is one of the most proven strategies for getting issues onto government agendas, much as we'd expect. And many have impacted public discourse, political agendas, and parliamentary debates through media engagement. Political parties have also developed initiatives based on precarity research, even if they don't bother to cite it. The other thing is establishing workers, precarious workers, into positions of power, so their voices can be heard. Which again we've just heard an example of within EASA itself. Critiquing institutional power structures from the outside is completely insufficient. People need to be on the inside, amplifying voices and positions of power, such as lead roles in institutions, professional organisations, and unions. This is key to getting precarity on the agenda. Ensuring that staff who transition into permanent positions continue to fight, few and far between as they are, for precarious workers' rights, and maintain ties with anti-precarity organisations is really vital, as speaking out against precarity has the potential to make precarious scholars more vulnerable and less employable. Concerns remain around more expensive contracts, leading to increased workloads for fewer posts. And this, I think, was what I say about laws that you think will work to start with. So there's concerns where progress in legislation is apparent that it isn't necessarily working or happening as we would like to see. And that's again where having people in one place for a long time can help us understand that. Knowledge of the existing power structures and of where power lies can be used to map routes to inserting precarious campaigners into roles and committees, and to creating specific positions, elected or otherwise, and building relationships with sympathetic members in HR and senior management is important, but also must happen while being aware of the danger of being co-opted and complicit in decision making. And I think we've all seen, we had a precarious person in the room, so that decision was legitimized. So the few in the anti-precarity movements that have permanent posts can really provide some form of stability and allow initiatives to continue to exist and not only accumulate but retain important inner institutional knowledge as well. The role of trades and labour unions, as you can imagine, varies across and within countries quite significantly. And there's really variable representation of precarious and casualised workers. But there is, so there's the roles to be played, I would say, by unions, as well as short-lived, single-lived campaign groups and longer-running institutions. Because sometimes precarious workers can't even get access, depending on the country, to a union. There's real importance to have solidarity within the diversity of precarious workers, which, as I said when identifying the difficulties, isn't easy, because there is a real because it's difficult to even identify them. But further building of divergent and complex solidarities is required, as the diverse nature of precarious workers, from professional services to PhDs, ECRs, and long-term academic precariat. So solidarity between these non-precarious workers also and precarious workers is required to fight these deteriorating conditions for all staff and students. So low unionisation is a real challenge to anti-precarity work, and many initiatives report difficulty recruiting and organising precarious members. And this is partially due to high workloads and the vulnerability of precarious workers and the time constraints, and the very emergent nature of the movements themselves hindering plans. So it can be very difficult to get things off the ground in the first place when people are exhausted and losing their jobs and not in place for a very long time. So the good news is, just to, while we're going between the two, is that there is a visible increase in anti-precarity work across all the countries that we're looking in. There's many formal and informal activist groups, as well as statutory attempts to try and affect change at a national level. These movements are largely collaborative. So we see a lot of joint working between unions and non-union groups. These movements include academic institutions trying to work with unions as well, informal initiatives, working with collectives. Many of these groups are actively doing advisory and advocacy work as well, awareness raising, community building, online advice, and promoting advocacy services. that are outside of their organisations. Progress, however, is tempered by, in many countries, laws coming in to prevent union striking, or to prevent unions adequately representing precarious staff. There's progress in building networks of networks. I think particularly in Germany, there's a lot of networks that I discussed within the report to create diverse solidarities across the different anti-precarity groups and movements. And it's essential, like I said, it's essential to have people inside and outside unions, because of the varied roles that they can play within the workplace, and because of the various ways that they can radicalize within those spaces as well. Laws passed, unfortunately, when things do come up at a national level, also tend to face a lack of funding. So even when it feels like success has been had, the laws can't actually be implemented. In some countries, progress around postdoctoral working conditions sits aside others where many work precariously with very, very limited rights. There's a lot of work underway building union strength, union representation, wage negotiation, and the right to labour union membership. Many initiatives are focusing on research and gathering further studies and surveys, increasing the evidence base on precarity. Challenging toxic narratives and discrimination. So anti-precarity movements often have a really important role to play in challenging toxic narratives and hostile working environments, debunking antiquated ideas that precarity, competition, and associated stress and fear lead to high-quality research. Which is incredibly prevalent. The belief that these experiences are kind of some kind of rite of passage is incredibly damaging. A precarious career need not represent a lack of talent or dedication, but also but signals exploitative and discriminatory structures. With all but one of the respondents to the questionnaire directly involved in addressing discriminatory practices, serious consideration must be given to harassment and the abuse of power endemic within higher education institutions. Respondents identified an increased risk of precarity due to sex, gender identity, race, class, career stage, health, disability, and sexuality. Some also looked at age, political beliefs, neurodiversity, or religion, which they highlighted in addition. Health and well-being is very much a focus for many of these groups, and I don't think that although this was just after the pandemic, I think we know from other research that's been done around mental health and precarity that it's not just to do with what was happening during lockdown. It's directly related to working conditions, job security, and even things like housing security. I was speaking to academics who are looking at like living in their cars, in order to travel between works. Overall, anti-precarity initiatives recognise that precarity disproportionately impacts marginalised groups. There was a lot of concern coming through, though, about a lack of knowledge or capacity to consider the multitude of inequalities faced. Because there's a lot of work to be done on training, and that's huge as well, but you're trying to manage everything else. Anti-precarity groups also do a lot of work on sexual harassment, compliance procedures, protecting whistleblowers, and building strategic action with larger organisations. About half of the respondents were to the survey, and I think a lot more that around the desk-based work as well, were directly involved with protesting, including collaboration with students, defending the right to protest, joint action with non-academic staff, and challenging staff prosecutions. Some organisations surveyed and as part of the desk-based research were working against coercive force, arrests, disappearances, and killings. So we're talking about bodily precarity for people depending on where they are in the world as well. Here, precarity shows itself as intrinsically connected with broader political issues of extractivism, colonialism, capitalism, neoliberalism, and migration and security politics. So more research is needed, isn't it always? So as I move towards our recommendation, we remember it's important not just to be campaigning against things, but also for things. Unions and campaign groups need to set the agenda for change and be part of the conversation at the highest possible level. We must share and monitor practice by looking at countries that are at different stages of fighting the neoliberal and marketized models of universities to learn what works, even if we need to recognise the same approaches will not be directly transferable. There's a role for professional organisations such as EASA and Precanthro, much as they're playing just now, that have oversight of different institutions between and within countries, and who can provide spaces at conferences and other events for coalescing around precarity. Such networks allow us to learn from the continuum of struggle, and there's an ongoing process of collective learning within anti-precarity resistance movements. It's important to keep ownership of the research as well with the precarious workers, and with where possible, getting fair compensation for such research, and not just doing free research for the universities themselves, which is what feels like it's continually happening. It can be all too easy to conceive of the case studies and I'm sure some of what we're about to hear, the struggles that people are facing, as disconnected episodes of success or failure in the short term, rather than understanding their interconnected historical status. These mobilizations have evolved, building on the experience of previous struggles, and while introducing novel interventions within the material conditions, they found themselves they have found themselves here, and they are still sustaining. And they can always help sustain hope in what feels like a hopeless situation. So here are the final recommendations. I don't know, but here's the starting point to build on. So I'll go through each of these in a little bit of detail if I've got time, if that's okay. Yeah. Unions and academic, and I've got to say, there's these we pulled these between us, and there was a lot of discussion and debate on what these what they should be, and I'm sure that they're not really final anyway. So unions and academic organisations or learned societies, however they define themselves, must take precarity as a core concern, and that campaigning and lobbying must focus on increased public funding. So groups must enhance the kind of credibility for precarious memberships, who are now on the majority. This focus is essential to reduce precarity. Funding must be ring-fenced for anti-precarity work and focus on raising staff pay and public funding models. Legislation attempting to address precarity without sufficient resources actually ends up leading to fewer contracts and continues the spiral of competition and job losses. Second recommendation is that specific work to address precarity and exploitation of those on PhD and postdoctoral contracts and working visas should be a priority. These groups are particularly vulnerable, and early to mid-career academics need to be given adequate support and mentoring, as well as protection from the prevalence of overwork. Scholarly organisation have a role to play in developing mentoring structures and establishing practices of care. And this is, so we don't end up with this constant academic precariat that goes on, and people being put in a situation that is what is expected as well, because then people may not continue to challenge it. We need stronger legislative protection of staff contracts in higher education nationally. For this, we need to create policies and statutes that enhance workers' protections and reduce the plight of the long-term precariat. These must include permanent contracts beyond professorships, broader work with lobby groups in the humanities and social sciences, and with national-level policymakers in science and education is necessary to make visible the struggle against precarity and to fight for legislative change. Unions have a role to play in the national collective bargaining beyond matters of just individual casework. Fourthly, specific attention must be paid to migrant, ethnic minority and marginalised workers and students. Anti-precarity initiatives should centre intersectional approaches, and this includes understanding the multiple and intersecting vulnerabilities that migrant workers face regarding visas and relocation, as well as paying attention to equality issues that are seen as secondary to the labour contract. Research and evidence-driven work on precarity and its evolving nature is crucial. So research-led activism combines knowledge production with organising, and should ethically integrate how work is conducted by overworked, precarious staff, and include precarious staff in research design. Research must integrate diverse perspectives and requires increased focus on mid-career and career-long precarity, and not just seeing it as an ECR issue. Successful mechanisms for testimonial campaigns are essential. They give the precariat a voice, provide evidence bases for government campaigns, and raise public awareness. Scholarly organisations should disseminate successful campaign techniques and best practice. We need to build coalitions of university research and teaching staff beyond the academic workforce. So academia is so often characterized by elitism and hierarchy, with academic workers pitted against the other university workers. Integrating non-academic and academic-related precarious higher education workers into the campaign work is necessary, as is recognizing the various organizations outside formal union structures. This has broader implications for an enriched academia by breaking down perceived barriers between the applied and the scholarly. And I think I've said throughout, kind of looking at professional services staff throughout, they're the kind of people who are actually kind of sustaining the day-to-day running of the university is something that is not nearly being done enough. Securing the rights, because like I said, in a lot of different countries, you don't have the rights to even join a labour union if you are a precarious worker. So securing those rights is very, very important. And ensuring within, even once you are a member, that you have representation. So union membership should be available to all precarious workers, and unions should actively invite them and seek them as members. As we've said, they form over half of the academic population. As the issues faced by precarious workers are interlinked with working conditions for all, there should be a proportionate representation of precarious workers in the democratic and decision-making structures of unions and other academic organizations and networks. And finally, create an international and cross-disciplinary network of precarious higher education workers, including working towards standardized career frameworks across the sector, which are open, critical, and community owned. So no small task there. While conditions are different across institutional and national boundaries, it's imperative for organizations to work towards opening and or participating in spaces that offer opportunities for debate and resources, best practice guides for those wishing to discuss and conduct research-based activism. These should operate through democratic structures and safe spaces, secured against, as much as possible, against all forms of harassment, bullying, and managerialism. So just as an end point, I realise I've kind of maybe spoken too fast and maybe spoken too much. But what we're trying to get to is we really want to avoid a reductive approach and try and see the big picture. Precarity is endemically connected with other issues, broader issues of colonialism and capitalism and neoliberalism. Any fight needs to locate the struggle against precarity amongst the big picture of the world today, issues around developing technology, climate crisis, and conflict, areas which are impacted by academia as well as impacting upon it. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Heather. Very happy to see at the end that several struggles are connected, but it might at the same time feel overwhelming to try to tackle all of them at the same time. So let's take it bit by bit, shall we? We thought about actually giving the audience the possibility to ask questions directly about the report before we engage with the other speakers and then open up to a broader conversation. So if anyone has any questions from the audience or the speakers regarding the report itself and what Heather has been presenting to us, please go ahead and ask. You can either write in chat or you can take the word, use the hand raising function. And I want to take the floor and talk to us about, I don't know if it was clear for everyone when I was reading your biography, was even more salient, you know, that you said you were an associate professor in Bangladesh, and from there your migration actually you know, made you demoted you to the rank of postdoc researcher that you have right now. And I know you've written a really great article about that recently, and so looking forward to hearing about your experiences.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anna, for already introducing that, what I was going to thinking to talk about, and also for this platform to talk about me. I actually wanted to start from the ending of Heather's fantastic report that it's precarity, it's so broad and so complex. So I was just thinking that, is there any ideal precarious academic? Is there any ideal image of a precarious academic? If that is, we need to deconstruct that too, because I even, you know, as a feminist anthropologist, I always know the categories, and you always try to fit within the categories in class, race, gender, all these things. And when you talk about intersectionality, you always feel that it's kind of misfitting. And when I'm talking about precarity, I always feel that it's misfitting in a way that the way we understand the precarity that Heather was talking about, it has been understood as a liminal phase for a early researcher, so a PhD, post-PhD time. It's a kind of liminal phase where academic move from PhD student to more permanent academia. I mean, I was told that too. So, but then my experience doesn't fit with that. And that's kind of makes me, leaves me confused most of the time. And to understand that, I will actually share a few of my experience because Anna was encouraged to me. I don't know how relevant it is, but I have to. So like I studied anthropology. My department was at Jahangirnagar University in Bangladesh, and I studied at Jahangirnagar University as a undergraduate student because I saw the department was feminist and radical. And so I switched to anthropology from archaeology, and which became a refuge during my difficult times for myself. So Department of Anthropology at JU is the pioneering anthropology department in Bangladesh, and established in 1985. Since then, it has trained numerous students with critical minds whose role is notable in Bangladeshi society. So it has a very good reputation in Bangladesh. And it's one of the fourth public university from the independence of Bangladesh. So it also enjoys certain kind of autonomy. And all of the faculties are permanent positions. So there's no precarity in the universities. So I was a student, and my faculties were also involved. So when I was undergraduate students, I participated on one of the most significant anti-rape movement in Bangladesh, and that was initiated from the university. And the faculties of Jahangirnagar University, faculties of anthropology department, were behind that movement. So they're a very vital part of that movement. So I saw my faculties, my teachers were so vocal and so resisting about the existing inequality and status quo that I thought that's anthropology is. So eventually when I passed my master's, I managed, because I was luckily I stood. Admission test is also fierce because it's a public university. The student fees is very low. So I stood first, and eventually, because if you have a very good result in masters, you can join as a faculty, as a lecturer post, directly as a lecturer post. So I joined my university as a lecturer. And I taught there for almost 10 years. And I eventually I actually promoted associate professor when I was in study leave in a PhD student, as a PhD student. So I was promoted from on leave. And at that time, I wasn't getting any salary, although. And so the condition is when you get the lectureship, but you also have to have a PhD, and preferably from a Northern university, highly ranked university. So that's how I was getting study leave while I had my tenure job in Bangladesh. So I wasn't precarious when I was a PhD student even. I was an associate professor when I was a PhD student. But the thing is, I had to, the reason I when I was in anthropology, it's like the curriculum opened up my eyes to the power of critical and feminist thinking and showing me how to challenge the inequalities. And I was involved in, and I enjoyed anthropology so much. And the thing is, the reason how to say it? So I got full PhD scholarship from National University of Singapore, but I couldn't take it because of the experience I had that many women, especially in Bangladesh and worldwide, face is the domestic violence. And I had to gone through divorce, and I had to fight for my custody of my daughter. And then I decided to move to Europe from Bangladesh for study leave for two reasons. One is to get higher education in gender studies, because I wanted to be, I already became an angry feminist, so I wanted to enhance my intellectuality, academic credibility in gender studies. So I got a master's in Central European University. I got two scholarships. So I took my daughter and came to Hungary. I actually escaped from Bangladesh. It was not only a migration, I fled. And I fled, but I never had to, I was privileged that I never had to go through the asylum seeking process, the international protection, because I got scholarships all through. So for me, this migration is fleeing from the domestic violence, fleeing from my gender discrimination oppression. But at the same time, I wanted to build my career in Europe. So although I flee from one kind of oppression, and I thought that I would be able to, because I had 10 years of teaching experience, what I lack is a PhD. So if I manage to do PhD, I will be able to build a career in Europe. And I was so wrong. I was proven very wrong. And then when I, so yeah, I think, so I would be, and this what happened that this hope is quickly shattered. The constant rejection from relevant jobs after my PhD, and the feedback of this made me doubt my credibility, that what's wrong here? What's going on? And then I realized that my publication, teaching and research experience from the Global South does not really count here, does not really count as credible in Global North. So it's my sense of precarity. I am privileged in many ways, but at the same time, the way I became a tenured associate professor, I had to eventually leave the job in Bangladesh because of that. My personal and gender situation. So I have applied more than 50 jobs after my PhD, and I keep a spreadsheet about it, actually, to process everything. And it's like now it's been 57. And so the thing is, the amount of cover letter I wrote is more than my page limit, is more than my PhD thesis. And that's actually I think true for most precarious academic here. So it's and I really wondered that the amount of my productive time I had to spend for applying for jobs and funding, it's almost 1/3 of my real productivity. And I couldn't be, I was like thinking that how can I be committed to an institution, to my current job full time, if the university of the institutions is not committed to me, if I constantly looking for the next time, if I constantly having sleepless night thinking about that how I'm going to pay the bill after my current contract finishes. So I wondered that why universities are keeping that system that taking away so many working productive hours of the academic researcher and teachers to those work. If I didn't have to write so many cover letters, so many applications, spend hours and hours for that, I could have done much more quality teaching and quality research in the current institution I am working. So that means the precarity cannot be beneficial for, if you look at the quality of the university. So by now, I think, as Heather also saying, that it's not an accident. As you know, and perfectly explored to the report, this is not the case, that university really, like, it's not about the quality of the work. It's about to maintain the system, maintain the status quo. So the precarity in academia is a structural issue. It is planned by design to control the most progressive institution, which is university. So far, we know that. And so that it doesn't go out of hand. And the education industrial complex is willing to sacrifice quality work at the expense of fierce criticism and critical thinking, and that the universities could provide. And constant precarity silences us and makes us scared to not challenge the system that keeps and nurtures institutions' inequality, so that academics and intellectuals do not critique the status quo. My experience shows that my faculties, my colleagues are extremely active in political situation and any kind of inequality is because they were tenured. They didn't have to scared of losing their job. On the contrary, here in Global North, we see that not only precarious academics, but also even tenured academics can lose their job. Especially in the last 1 year, we saw that even Jews academies lost their jobs for in the accusation of being anti-Semitic, only because they protest against the genocide happening in Palestine. So so it's a very clear that precarity in academia is a design to keep the status quo, and it's a tool of silencing. So this is but that's my situation, and where what precarity did to me, it's a kind of I wrote that in my article that it seems like I came from margin to center of academic industrial complex of the world, but it really, what happened, I came to center to margin, if you see that, it's in a precarious way, because it marginalized me in many ways. And I don't even fit to that perfect precarious scholar in that way, that I don't know actually how my CV looks, because I have years of decades of teaching experience. I have loads of publications that doesn't really fit into that global North highly ranked publications. I've been writing for decades in op-eds in public places, I am involved in different kind of organizing, but still nothing counts. And by this time, I don't know, maybe as Anna says, that I probably passed even the criteria of ageism, that my CV got so unfit to match with this academia and global north, that I don't even know that what is going to happen. If so far I thought, oh, maybe I have to, first I thought I need the PhD, then I thought, oh, I need some publications in highly ranked journals, then I will do it. So it's become, in Bangla, there's a word called morichika. It means that it's a kind of illusion. If you are in desert, if you in a desert, you see there's, okay, there is a water in far away, and when you walk through that, the water is gone. So for us, I feel like we are driven to a certain kind of thing. The more we go forward, we think, okay, the tenure job is there, but when we go there, it's not there anymore. So that's became a perpetual reality for me, that I thought, okay, probably I will need 2 years, 3 years, someone says 5 years, Anna says 10 years. So I don't know when it's going to be end, or if it will end, this precarious, or if I have ever if I ever know that now I can pay my bills. Pay my bills means pay my rent. I won't go homeless. I don't think I will ever have that luxury that I will say, oh, I will not be homeless. I have that security. So no, we don't have that security. And this insecurity, what did to me is I felt that I can't even be that that angry feminist anymore. It doesn't I cannot feel that I can be angry, because it is systematic, and I am constantly trying to fit in. And when I'm trying to fit in, you cannot be angry, because you are always feeling that you are lacking something, it's your fault. And that's silencing me. I felt that I lost the ability to be even outraged, to be even vocal. But after that, I talked so many negative thing. What I need to say that what I gained through this is the collective pre-control. I've been involved with them for last few years, and that is where I found that the more we will organize, and the more we will collect, we will actually multiple our voices. Because I was thinking about when Heather was talking about the toxic narrative, I was thinking about that our precarity is it's strangely not vocal enough, not out there much. We talked about in between us. We are having solidarities. We are having platforms which I got from Pricanto, and we are doing a fantastic work to I think, and I'm really glad to found a platform where I feel that I belong. And but I think we need to put our narrative, the precarious situation in the university, because there is an idea of universities is still there, that the lecturer are kind of having cultural elite, which is not. And it's the other industrial people who are not in academia. They don't know that's what's going on. University is very good of hiding that precarity, and that's also part of the system, because there's so many PhD students. I want to discourage PhD students, because I know that I discourage academia, anyone I know, because but then when I would be professor, I would want to have a PhD students, because having a PhD students enhances my CV. So everyone wants PhD students, but I think it's a very irresponsible for us academic to encourage someone to give the hope that after a PhD you will get something. And this narrative, because the precarity in academia is not out there, it's not open, it's not discussed enough in public sphere, people really don't know. And still there are so many PhD students coming here hoping that they will get job and they will ruin their career for 5 to 10 years. And then they realize, what I'm doing here, I wasted so many years. So I think this is what I feel, the hope that with these precarious platforms that Heather was mentioning. I was thinking that if we have a bigger solidarity, if we have a stronger solidarity, and we can say that if even if we're not 99%, we are almost 90%, we are majority. So our voices, like if you can single out one or two, but our collective voices can multiply these conditions, and I think to make this systematic injustice out there. And that's the hope I still have, that our collective solidarity might resolve something good or better. Yeah, that's all. Thank you for I'm done for now.
Thank you so much, Nasrin. Thank you. I shared your wonderful article in the chat for
Thank you so
anyone who
much.
is interested in that. And I think Nasrin makes a really compelling argument with her autoethnography about what it means to be in the margin and in the center, and then have the center and the margin reversed. Thank you so much for that. Stay hopeful and stay angry as well. From here, we'll move to Eastern Europe, Central and Eastern Europe. Petra Ezedin from Czech Republic prepared a couple of slides for you that I will be sharing from my computer. Petra, the floor is yours. You just tell me when you want me to change.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really happy that we can also share our voice from this particular region. Sometimes we also feel like in a forgotten periphery of especially European academia. And I'm going to present here just one particular initiative we've been involved in as a large group of anthropologists here working especially at faculties of humanities or philosophical faculties here. It's called Hodina Pravdy in Czech, but in English it's the Hour of Truth. And it was not such initiative just about working conditions, because of course we are experiencing the same issues with working loads, with a lot of working, with a lot of teaching hours, supervising a lot of students, having not so fixed contracts anymore, or waiting for them. I waited, for example, myself 15 years in order to have a fixed contract as assistant professor here in Prague. But as we heard in the first presentation, it's not just about the salaries, but here is a lot about the salaries, and this initiative is a lot about our salaries. So we can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so I just wanted to introduce you with the structural background of our precarity here. As I said, most of the anthropology departments are placed at faculties of humanities, and they are long-term underfunded. Even though, for example, now the Prime Minister of the Czech Republic himself, he is a political scientist, and the Ministry of Education is a musicologist. So they are coming, in effect, from the fields of humanities and social sciences, but they are making drastic cuts in the field of university education. So this is leading to various long-standing systematic injustices. We have one specific form of injustice. It's called economic intensity coefficient, which were supposed to differentiate the cost of teaching in different disciplines, meaning that you have different salaries if you teach at medical faculty or science faculties or technical faculties or universities. So in fact, universities are paying significantly different wages for the same work, even the same university. For example, Charles University is paying different salaries for the same work. And also, the problem is that teachers hardly can reach the minimum decent wage or salaries that would cover the cost of living locally. I have to say that, of course, we are intersecting here with the housing crisis, or for older professors with the care crisis, meaning that they have to really support their older parents. And this is leading to the situation that no one almost can live just with the one salary. You have to have either another research projects plus teaching full-time job, meaning, for example, 8 courses per year, supervising 12 students, minimum 12 students per semester, but also to have another jobs aside of it. So people are combining jobs at different faculties, of course. It's also creating the situation that younger people could not reach the jobs. And the second, or for example, they are teaching at private programs for overseas students, especially those coming from US, or they're working as translators, or working for NGOs, as is my case. For example, I've been working for years for NGOs. Not just because I want to apply my knowledge, of course, but also because it was super necessary for me to work there in terms of the financial need of my family. So also, what is important to say here, that also this initiative is including not just those teachers, but also is including non-academic school staff, meaning administration, but also PhD students, because they're also facing the similar situation, even though they have scholarships from university, but this is really minimal contribution, and they have to have full-time jobs aside of their study. This is resulting to the situation that humanities are just losing a large part of the young generation of academics. So PhD students are leaving their programs after first, second year of their study. And also more senior researchers often leave their academic position, even from fixed-term contracts, because of their low salaries. And I think I have to mention here, because we are here in international community, transnational community of academics, precarious academics, that also international projects like Horizon or other projects are calculating from local salaries, meaning that we have 2 or 3 times lower salaries as our colleagues, while living in a city with high living expenses such as Prague. And so I think it's also important to speak about it with our international colleagues, that this is creating intra-EU regional inequalities and specific kinds of precarities. For example, how we solve it in terms of my department, that we are being evaluated by international evaluators every 5 years from the perspective of our research excellence. This the excellency word is really so crucial, and is glorified also here in our precarious academia. And when we have to put there what we have published and what kind of projects we are running at our department, we are also starting with the introduction, like what are our working conditions, because those international evaluators are really not aware of what's happening in this region. So I think we can do also small things to really raise awareness among colleagues in at least in the region of European Union. When I'm speaking that more senior researchers are often leaving academia, they're leaving paradoxically to the sector of primary or secondary schools because their salaries are much higher than now those working in humanities in the Czech Republic. So next slide, please.
Sorry, I'm trying to change it, but it's not working. Let me stop sharing and try again. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay.
Yeah, I tried to put some pictures. We started in 2023, and Hodina Pravdy, this initiative, is including not just trade unions from academic environment, but also associations of deans and academic senate supported the initiative, and also PhD students initiatives and student initiatives are involved in that. And we had a first demonstration in March 28, which, you know, it's International Teachers' Day, and it was in 2023 already, with the slogan at the end of the cheap labor. And as you see, we had a big demonstration in the center of Prague. This is in front of the historic building of Czech Philharmonic. So this is not my picture. This is a picture done by activist photographer Petr Zavlak-Vrabec. Next picture, please. Yeah, this is also the picture. As you see, I think we saw it also in the first presentation that we are super creative in terms of the slogans and yeah, we try to be super visible in the public space, and I will come to this a little bit later. There is another picture from the same demonstration, the first one, and here we are in the front of the Ministry of Education trying to speak to the minister, and in fact he also invited few of the representatives in order to speak with him. We had a few also roundtables with the state representatives, but the Ministry of Education was kind of super arrogant in terms of really speaking about the austerity times, about the way how we have to love our work, and yeah. So please, next slide. Yeah. Of course, we wanted to push it a little bit more towards some kind of change. So we have decided to organize a strike. It was in October 17, 2023, and you'll see we have the leaflet. For example, this is particular leaflet for our faculty, and we try to introduce it to our colleagues, because what also was mentioned in the first presentation, the unionization of university professors is very low. It has a particular kind of explanations. We can come to this during discussion, because I know that there is another colleague from Germany who's supposed to present it here. So I try to make it quick here. But yeah, for example, in my faculty, it's just 10% of people who are organized at the faculty unions. So we try to give them information. We also try to speak with students what they're supposed to expect. We have organized also lectures, kind of creative workshops, in order really to involve all people in the institution, in that particular building, in order to support the initiative. I have to say, even those people who were not at the end involved, it was around 40% at our faculty involved in the strike. They really supported us, at least symbolically. Especially a dean also was in great support, and later on also the rector of the university was really supporting all the initiative. So next slide. Yeah, here I just put together something from the website of Hodina Pravdy. We have constructed a website You can find a lot of information in the Czech language, but also in English language, because we try to also involve our international colleagues who have relocated by accident mostly for the family reunification, because otherwise there is not such a great attraction for international colleagues. It's really difficult to internationalize the field in this sense. So you can see that we really try to speak a lot about structural underfunding of higher education as such, speaking that we still are under the average budget which states supposed to put into the higher education. And also we spoke about the minimum wage, also that the salary is guaranteed by law for those employed in primary secondary education are higher, but of course it's not a bad thing. They deserve to have great salaries as well. And also we try to speak, and I think it's also important that those mid-careers and seniors are also speaking in order to support the reform of doctoral studies, which supposed to be completed at the end of this year. Because yeah, the financial situation of doctoral students is pretty bad here in Czechia. So next slide, please. You can see here that students were really active also in terms of helping us to make transparency, especially students of anthropology, gender studies, and environmental studies. So those are, I think we did a great job in terms of really educating them to be really sensitive on the structural inequality. So they really supported us here. So you see the collective work here at my faculty. Here we, another picture, this is my picture, as obviously it's a much worse quality as before. And we try to really speak with those who were passing the building, trying to explain. Also students could write us support letters, and it was really, I have to say, emotional then to read them, like how they express that, yeah, we see it, how you are exhausted, we see how you are running from one work to another. And we would like to, I think you deserve the better working conditions. So yeah, the next slide. But of course, the story is not ending that time. So again, we try to organize another demonstration. At the time, I was not in Czechia, I was in Cluj, Romania at the workshop, but as you see, we have done another demonstration in Prague, and it was not just for the teachers from Prague, but for the teachers, university teachers from all of the Czech Republic came to the center of Prague, and they try to again really verbalize what's happening in the field of humanities. So it was June the 3rd, 2023. Next slide. Yeah, and if there is a happy end, not so, but we have achieved something. So I will start with the positive results. I think we made the precarity problem visible in the public space. We had we included media, we had spokespersons, we publish our stories, all the strategies we heard today at the first presentation, we try to include there. And also, I think it was the first time, in fact, in a contemporary history from 1989 that we were able to unite across the Czech Republic, across the universities, and across the faculties of humanities. And also we included technical staff and administrative members of faculties. They massively joined also trade unions at that time. So I think it was also necessary that we just didn't include academics there. And as I said, we also included international colleagues who also shared their personal stories with the media. And also we managed to get the students involved. I think it's really important, especially regarding the history in the Czech Republic. And what we have not achieved, we did not reach a solidarity across all academia. When I was speaking that we did somehow united across universities, but not across all disciplines. As I said, there are still big inequalities in between different faculties. And of course, if you have better salary, you don't want to share your salary with someone from other faculty. And also, I have to say that the Academy of Sciences, which is kind of parallel system of in the research sector in Czechia, was not completely supportive to us. I think also it plays a role that there is kind of competitiveness, but some of the departments of Czech Academy of Sciences supported our initiative as well. But I was suspected that it will be more massive support from their side as well. But we have different interests, and as I said, there is also the financial competition in the sector. So speaking about the money, because I think sometimes numbers tells us a lot. Instead of a minimum budget adjustment, 11 million to stabilize the system, just to stabilize, we receive only promise of 3 million for 2025. So, but for example, when I will speak about my particular faculty, my situation or situation of our colleagues at the Department of Social and Cultural Anthropology, Charles University is introducing from January a new unified salary tables, so they are not going to be such big differences in between different faculties. So, but of course, this is not solving the problem, because the increase will be just around 5%, and I think in order to make the salary, it needs to be doubled at least, but it's not going to happen obviously. Next slide, please. We are still in a process of speaking about our situation. You see here picture from a performance done by PhD students in the anniversary of Velvet Revolution, November 17, 2023, where they try to really again advocate for the better working conditions or salary conditions in Czechia. And I will end here. We are kind of stopped right now because, as you know, last year in December 2023, we had this horrible mass shooting at the philosophical faculty here in Prague. And I think the academic community is still in the recovering from this horrible event, and we are in process of just preparing another initiatives. But we took our time just to recover and really to go through this tragic event as community. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Petra. Great to know about Eastern Europe managing to mobilize. Right, so Isabel, you are our last speaker.
Yes.
I'll give the floor directly.
Thank you. I'll bring the slides up. Can you all see that?
Yes, we can.
Good, wonderful. I'll try to keep it short since we're running towards the end of the session. But yeah, I was basically asked to talk a bit about German academic labor conditions. So here we are. As been mentioned before, they're especially bad due to legislation, among other things. And yeah, here you can see 2 images from last year, some activism that I was involved with. So I'm a member of one of the networks that was mentioned in the report, NGAWIS. It's the Network for Good Academic Labor Conditions in Germany. We are represented here on the left image with a flag, the orange flags, that's us. I joined the network about a year ago after doing grassroots organizing and running into problems with that, because as you all will know, grassroots requires people to constantly put in extra time and work among the time and work that we already have to spend on our academic careers, and a lot of people kept dropping out, so it was difficult to keep things together. And I decided, okay, why not join one of the existing organizations that there are. The images that you can see here, you see dinosaurs. Why dinosaurs? Initially, we were doing an event outside the Natural History Museum in Berlin. That's on the left, this grand arch that you can see there. They have a prominent collection of dinosaur skeletons, and they had an event about that on the Long Night of Science, which happens here in Berlin every year. We decided to join that with our struggle. So we were present outside on the stairs of the museum and informing people about how we're all going to go extinct due to extremely bad labor conditions. I'm wearing the green dinosaur suit. I'm carrying a sign that says my arms are shorter than my contract. So we were having some fun there. On the right-hand side, similar scene. So last year was a bit more lively due to I'm going to just swap. So the legislation that we have, which is also a driving or sort of paralyzing factor in activist engagement around academic labor conditions in Germany, is the called a Wissenschaftszeitvertragsgesetz, or WISZVG, short in German, short for academic short contract law. So what is this thing? Here you can see kind of the leaflet from one of the German education unions, the GEW, which I'm also a member of. This is one of the few resources that I've just taken a screenshot here in English language. It's really hard to get information that is sort of not geared towards German speaking academics. So they have a leaflet. If anyone's interested, you can download that on their website, explaining what this law is. And the problem with this law is it's basically a law that prescribes temporary contract conditions in German academia. It's been around since 2007, but it's really sort of existed in practice much longer. So you can trace it back to the 1950s, basically, where the Wissenschaftsrat, so the science council, has started to decrease on permanent positions in academia, reducing the amount of professorships that there are, and also not really making way for positions that are what we in Germany call the Mittelbau, so people who are not professors, but who are still wanting to do permanent labor and who are needed in the system to be teaching, to be doing admin, to be doing research as well. So that doesn't really exist. The system is a system that is geared towards making it to the top. So you have to become a professor in order to have a permanent position, basically. And that's due to this law, which really, as a law, came into existence in 2007. The law claims to protect, in inverted commas, academics from precarious labor conditions, but it really kind of does the opposite. So what is this law? It's a very short law. If you look at the legal text, it's a couple of pages, which for laws is not that much. Yet it's one where people who are looking into this, and as academics, we would all think, yeah, we're fairly clever people. We can read a couple of pages of legal text. It's kind of impenetrable what's really going on. And it's also, in terms of how it's being put into action by politics, made even more obscure. It's a law that prescribes that you have basically 6 years while you are a PhD researcher to be working in employment under conditions that are non-permanent. So you can have 6 years of temporary contracts during your PhD phase, and the same applies again once you have finished the PhD. You get another 6 years. The logic was, or is still claimed to be, that it is in order to keep you from being permanently exploited by permanently having short-term contracts. But in fact, what it does, it gives you 6 years, and within those 6 years, you better make it. So you have to finish your PhD or you can't be employed anymore. To be honest, nobody really gets 6 years of PhD employment, but that's another problem not to be addressed right now. And then afterwards, you have another 6 years. There are a couple of exceptions. So for example, if you win third-party funding, I'm right now on 2 years of third-party funding that I won right after I'd finished my PhD. I have done 4 years of work after finishing my PhD. So you can hear my clock ticking as we speak. So the third-party funding is supposed to be counted differently, but a lot of universities don't apply this, and so on and so on. So in short, you understand, everyone who works in the German system is under extreme time pressure. And yeah, so basically a lot of people, after running out of this time, they just drop out of the system because they can't be employed anymore. that's the condition that we're in. And yeah, so the problems are there's an extreme amount of insecurity due to this law because it's applied in many different ways. Lots of universities apply it differently, they count differently. In Germany, we have a differentiation between the federal law, so this is a federal law, and then the state laws. All of the states have their own academic laws, and usually education is a state affair, as they say in Germany. So the states really sort of make their own conditions for how they implement laws and what they offer. They also have their own public service tariffs, some of them. So that all means that depending on where you're applying, and let's say you're applying across Germany, as many people are, plus yeah, internationally, that's a different thing. But then you again and again are facing situations where your possible employer or your current employer is telling you, oh, we're counting this way, we're counting this, we're not counting that. So you never know what your status actually is. As a personal example, I have been offered a job as I think that's my 4th postdoc within the 4 years of my postdoc life at a German university in May. I still haven't received the contract, and it's now end of October because they're still testing and checking whether I'm actually still employable. So this is where we're kind of at. So there's a lot of loopholes, but you never really know what to do with them. And it's basically, yeah, a tactics to keep you guessing whether you are employable still. And also universities are quite paranoid because they're usually suspecting that people who are supposed to be employees might in fact be unemployable due to this law. And then if they do employ them, they might sue them for permanent positions, which is why they better not employ them in the first place. And on top of that, yeah, like I already said, there's a lot of lack of information in English and also misinformation around, which makes it especially hard for international scholars to understand what is going on and to also fight for their rights. And to connect with German colleagues as well, because most of the organizing, in fact, does take place in German. So yeah, how do you include people? Couple of initiatives that have done work around this. So there's the hashtag Ich bin Hannah, I'm Hannah. This evolved from a sort of propaganda video of the Ministry of Education that featured Hannah, a young scientist who is very happy with the labor conditions and sort of happy with the fact that she was in a fierce sort of fight for being the best person, and happy that she got like short bits of time to do amazing free thinking in between those short-term contracts. Of course, yeah. So there was a backlash by colleagues. They wrote this book. It's again, sadly in German, but if you Google the hashtag and also look on Twitter, you find lots of documentation also in English. Sort of also recounting why this actually happened. So they're going back to the 1950s and sort of tracing the roots of this legal development. What has happened currently was mentioned before. So this law is perpetually sort of taken up again. Every government that comes in is like, oh, what do we do about this? Somebody's like expecting us to do something maybe, but also nobody's really very much interested in educational politics and a change of this law. But the current government has taken it up. They have offered to change it. That was in the spring of last year. And they've in fact offered to improve it by making the 6 years 4 years, which is not an improvement, as you can surely tell, because it shortens the time even more. And it doesn't mean that after the 4 years you get tenure or you get a permanent position. It just means that actually you only have 4 years to really work, and then you might be out completely. So the logic that they are implying, which is, oh yeah, we're improving labor conditions, which the current Minister of Education is still claiming with this proposed change, is certainly not true, and it's a joke to pretend so. This is currently in Parliament for discussion. The network that I'm a member of, NGervis, is also sort of has been asked to give a statement on this. We have released multiple statements on this. We're saying no, we want the law to be abolished completely, and we want permanent contracts for everyone from the start, because then you can choose to leave the job as anyone else who is an employee in Germany. So usually by law, you would be required to get a permanent contract in any other job within 6 months. So yeah, this is weird that we're the only ones to whom it doesn't seem to apply. But yeah, this is still in discussion. We don't think that anything will be decided to change. So it's basically stalling and nothing much is happening. On the state level, yeah, in Berlin, so the states can do different things. Berlin had implemented a Berlin-specific state policy where they wanted to offer tenure to people who were doing research after a certain amount of time. This has now been withdrawn. So you can kind of see, and that's not a very optimistic story, I'm sorry, that in terms of legislation, even if there are steps towards improving the legislation, that can also be retracted from. And I don't really know what one can do. It's good to have heard the report and the kind of findings of what really helps. What we are doing as a network, we're informing mainly. This is our website. There's also some information in English, the main demands and so on. We also offer kind of arguments if you're getting to talk to people who are saying, oh no, but competition is great and you should try harder and so on. You have some arguments to sort of fuel your speech. We're mainly at the moment doing Twitter work because there's not a lot of momentum anymore to go and protest. Last year it was stronger because they had announced this possible change of law and people were very angry in the spring. But then it kind of lost momentum over the summer, and by autumn we were back to basically doing the network work in a very small group. By the way, if there are colleagues here who are in Germany and who are willing to join, please do join us. We could use some help, and I promise you it's also fun. We're a very small group, you wouldn't think this, just a handful of people, because yeah, it requires some time and sort of sticking with it, which is really, really hard to do. And I don't blame anyone who doesn't manage to do that. I only have so much time myself. But yeah, so we're currently trying to do a sort of mix of policy advice. We have been speaking and so we've sort of been writing a bunch of things. We've written a report that proposes department structures rather than professorial chairs in Germany, which would be one way of improving the situation a little bit. We've been writing another sort of research-based policy advice paper on having a drastic change of the funding landscape away from third-party funding to sort of basic funding for permanent structures. Still struggling to abolish this law, and we will keep struggling with this. And we've asked for the Minister of Education, Bettina Stark-Watzinger, to step down, mainly also because she has been involved in sort of shaming academics. And this is a tabloid, German tabloid. You might have seen this on Twitter maybe, where she has sort of, together with those journalists, called out academics by name with photos, which is absolutely unacceptable. Also among them, not only professors, but also people who are not permanently employed. So you can see that the pressure is very high. Who have spoken out in favor of the Palestinian cause and supported people who have been protesting at universities. So this weirdly then comes together with censorship, which is currently ongoing in Germany. And of course, as you can imagine, it hits those even harder who don't have a permanent position, because they might not be employed again, they might not get the next grant and so on if they are a bit more vocal on this level. And so the minister has basically helped this case and also, as it came out through a whistleblower, tried to see internally in her ministry if it was possible to cut funding for people who were supporting this cause, which has led to what's called now this sort of the ministerial scandal in the German Ministry of Education that's still ongoing. You can read about it in this article. It's one of the articles in English, but it's a quite good article on Courthouse News. They also spoke to our network members, so we've been informing this. And yeah, so far the minister still hasn't stepped down, even though she has absolutely like not stuck with protocol and been sort of against any rules of academic freedom and freedom of research and expression and so on. But yeah, so these things go together, and that's where the pressure is at. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thanks. And oh yeah, to finish on a good note, this is me on the same steps of the museum, not in a dinosaur costume, but as a participant of a highly prestigious German academic exchange program, being greeted by the museum director, who insulted me when I was wearing a dinosaur costume a year earlier. So just to say, this is the same person, and it makes no sense, but that's where we're at. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabel. I put in the chat the address of the Mittelbau, so the initiative, also with the information that you have in English, and thank you for calling for those of us in the audience who are interested to participate. In the same vein, I would like to also open to the audience the possibility of participating in Precanthro. And Precanthro has been one of the successful initiatives, as Heather was mentioning in one of the recommendations, you know, to put people in places of power where they can actually decide and imprint a direction to academic organizations. And this is really one of the successful initiatives, I can say. But beyond that, what is really striking in all of your presentations is how much precarity actually ties in with other concerns. And so again, you know, it's not something that we should tackle or we could tackle in complete discontinuity and disconnection with other issues. It does come together with also the issue of Palestine, the issue of academic freedom, the issue of migration and what that does and how it's managed, you know. The issue of how certain Eastern Europeans are seen as dirty white or white but not quite, to quote just two of the titles of publications that have been published on the topic of Eastern and Western European hierarchies, so to say. And so this is, of course, this lays a lot of work ahead of us. There are also incredible initiatives and the incredible energy that Heather was also mentioning in one of her comments in the chat means that we are much more in a position to do something about it than we were, let's say, 5 years ago. So I'd like to open the floor to questions and comments and maybe other examples of successful initiatives and ideas of how to take the struggle further.